Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we're doing e-business and e-marketing. And we're specifically looking at the online marketplace analysis, the macro environment. And the learning outcomes obviously include analysts analyze the characteristics of the challenges and opportunities in the digital marketing environment, assessing the significance of the impact of the dynamic digital environment online, and discuss how different digital tools may enhance customer experience, explain the importance of digital platforms and the channels of marketing context, evaluate the various digital activities used to support and enhance multi-channel marketing, and analyze appropriate principles used in effective digital marketing. So what we're going to cover today includes the macro environment effects, the legal and moral constraints, and the macro environmental factors. And today's learning outcome, you should be able to identify how the macro environment, we're going to be using Pastel, which you've done before, affects an organization's digital marketing. We're going to consider legal, moral, and ethical constraints of digital marketing. And we're going to look at identifying aspects of each of the macro environmental forces that are particularly relevant to digital marketing. So we've looked at Pastel before in international business and various other units, and P stands for Pastel, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Pastel. So here's an activity here, and there are two YouTube links. And the question really is, what is Pastel, and what is Pest? And these two videos on YouTube goes into a bit more detail on these. So the macro environment, in the marketing literature, there are widely used mnemonics which aim to act as an aid to memorize for the macro environmental forces, e.g. pest, slep, and pastel, where each letter represents a slightly different arrangement of the following macro environmental forces, which includes the political forces, the economic forces, the social forces, the technological forces, the legal forces, and the environmental forces. So Bobby 2014 has argued that forces in the wider world also shape management policies, and a PESTO analysis, short for, once again, political, economic, social, cultural, technological, environmental, and legal. When these forces combine, their effect is more pronounced. Pharmaceutical companies face problems arising from slower progress in transferring scientific knowledge into commercial products, regulators who require more costly trials, companies offering cheap alternatives to patented drugs, and governments trying to reduce the costs of healthcare. So all these things can affect, even if we think about the pandemic today and the trials that are going through with COVID-19 and the new drugs that have actually come onto the market have been shown to be X percentage, effective. These have to go through various, political and legal channels and procedures. And normally, drugs normally coming out into the marketplace will have to go through more rigorous testing to see what the effects are in the longer term. But given the current situation with COVID-19, these drugs are going to be fast-tracked within, various countries, and they're going to be fast-tracked probably with a legislation that will allow these drugs to go through at a faster rate than they would normally go through, purely because of the current situation. So again, you need to look at Pastel, the political side, what's happening politically, or the legal side, the legal regulations that drug companies might need to follow. So all these things would come into, effect when a company is trying to enter that specific marketplace, or you're trying to sell these products online. So if we look at the Pastel example, we can see on the political, we've got various elements like taxation policy, privatization and deregulation of policies, environmental legislation, health and safety regulations, public expenditure controls, European Union directives, government stability. In terms of the economic side, these include things like the interest and inflation rates, um, you know, consumer confidence, the business cycle, economic growth prospects, unemployment rates, disposable incomes, labor costs. From the social cultural perspective, these include demographics, populations, household numbers, values in society, changing lifestyles, changes in consumer tastes and preferences, levels of education. From an environmental side, areas like the climate change, water resources, energy supplies. From a legal perspective, we're talking about employment law, company law, business regulations. And from a technological perspective, we are talking about new product potential, creating new competition, alternative means of providing services, new discoveries, rates of government and industry expenditure on research and development, changing communications technologies, new production technology, and the rate of technological transfer. So this was these are some of the elements under each of these, according to Bobby 2014. So in terms of political factors, there's another video here. It's only 7 minutes long, so I'd like you to have a go and watch this video here in terms of the political factors. So when we look at political factors, the political environment is shaped, by the interplay of government agencies, public opinion, consumer pressure groups, and industry-backed organizations such as Trust E. Political factors, the political environment has many factors which influence the trading environment, such as taxation, investment, and management of business and public affairs. Political forces are closely intertwined, with economic forces, such as the government sets financial goals for the Bank of England, which in turn sets interest rates to control inflation. So, the Bank of England is separate from the government, but the government will give the direction to the Bank of England, and they would say that we want you to hit an inflation target of between 2 and 3, or whatever their target is, and then the Bank of England will use their monetary control mechanisms to to have an effect on interest rates, whether they go increase interest rates or they decrease interest rates. So if they increase interest rates, then that's going to affect more people saving. If they decrease interest rates, so the rates on the money in your bank is worth less because you're getting less interest on that money, then people are more inclined to spend that money. So kind of enticing consumer spending. So the Bank of England can do that, and that affects the rate of inflation in terms of how much goods cost over a period of time. Political factors, it is important for digital marketers to be aware that political action, enacted through government agencies to control, the adoption of the internet, which includes political control, democracy, internet governance, taxation, tax jurisdiction. Okay, government action that can have a significant impact on the online market is control of intermediaries. This depends on the amount of regulation in a given country and in individual markets. Taking the UK example, regulation of different marketplaces occurs through these groups, through the Financial Services Authority. Controls provides of banking products such as current accounts, savings and loans. Ofcom control, provides of mobile phones and broadband services. So, and the government will want to have a big say in this, especially in the financial services. We've seen, the banking crisis in 2007, and we saw in a financial and banking crisis around the world, and this was due to the deregulation of legislation, allowing the banks and the financial institutions more freedom to lend money out to various people and customers, and especially within the subprime marketplaces. And this created a worldwide banking problem for the whole world. So again, tighter controls is necessary, especially from a government's perspective, because the government will be under pressure from consumers to take action. And likewise, then that will have an effect in terms of what the banks and financial institutions can do. Political factors, again, political systems shape what managers can and cannot do. Most governments regulate industries such as power supply, telecommunications, postal services, and transport by specifying, amongst other things, who can offer the service, the conditions that they have to meet, and what they have to charge. These influence managers' investment decisions. When the UK, most European governments altered the law on financial services. Non-financial companies like Virgin and Sainsbury's began to offer banking services. Deregulation of air transport stimulated the growth of low-cost airlines, especially in the USA. Southwest Airlines, Europe, EasyJet, and Australia, Virgin Blue. The European Commission is developing regulations to manage the environmentally friendly disposal of millions of personal computers and mobile phones that consumers scrap each year. And it's not only that in terms of governments as well. In the EU has set up a financial fund on terms of the sale of stocks and shares and banking stocks between institutions. And this is hoped to have a fund derived from financial institutions in terms of these financial transactions to build up a fund within the EU, estimating they think about 750 million euros a year. Personally, I think it's a good thing to be able to tax a little bit more and get a bit more money from the financial institution just in case there is another financial crash. At least then the EU, even though the UK now won't be part of the EU, but the EU will have those funds there in terms of securing themselves against this. And if they have these funds every year, and 10 years pass and they've got these funds, it's going to be amount up to a lot of money there, just in case they need it if another financial crash happens. Managers aim to influence these political decisions by, employing professional lobbyists, especially, and international, institutions. The European Commission relies on ideas from interested parties to inform its decisions, and lobbying firms provide this. They, focus on those people who have decision-making power, often members of the European Parliament, according to Hillman 2004, and cited by Bobby 2014. Traced the forms of political influence which companies exercise to support their position. So this is going to happen because companies obviously have their agendas and their aims and interests, and then they will try and put their points of view forward to those people who are in power, which is going to be those people in Parliament and the European Parliament. Economic forces. Globally, economic influences affect the level of success of business. Economic forces affect supply and demand, and consequently, it is important for digital marketers to identify which economic influences they need to monitor. Absolutely important, because even the economic, forces are going to affect, which country you go into. And if you decide to go into another country, then you have to deal with monetary and currency fluctuations and changes, and this will have an impact upon your profit and loss account in terms of your gross profit. The changing nature of a population, age profile, changes to working life and changing lifestyles, are beyond the control of the digital marketer. But such changes are relatively, slow moving. So, as long as these trends are identified, they can be accommodated for in the long term in terms of company strategic plans, but they need to be monitored on an ongoing basis, and that's the point with Pestel. Demographics, is a study of populations which uses measurable variables to monitor and analyze population trends. Demographic variables include age profiles, birth rates, education levels, gender, household structures, life stage in terms of single, married, divorced, total income and expenditure, working patterns and occupations. It's very important to monitor these because digital marketing allows for two-way kind of not pull but really push marketing, and this two-way marketing with the interactive of use of the internet with customers interacting with you in social media, social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also emails, and so on and so forth, means that you have to identify who your customers are and you have to monitor them all the time. When we think about international market growth and emerging economies, we got globalization. Kind of discussed globalization before, but again, globalization here, refers to the move towards international trading in a single global marketplace and the blurring of social and cultural differences between countries. In globalization, the increase of international trading and shared social and cultural values. It's a share and the movement of goods and services, technological research and development, and movement of these across different countries. And if we think about globalization, even if you think about when we travel, when we travel and we go to the airport, in Europe, you got the eye scanners and the handheld fingerprint readers as well. Eventually, every airport in Europe and including the UK have these, and then they'll be able to build up a database and a profile of you, and they should be able to eventually scan your face when you're just walking in a room. So again, it makes the whole process easier, even if you think of technology here in terms of globalization and the shared use of ideas, technology, research. Again, we need this globalization to a degree because, you think about COVID-19, well then if we had been sharing information, technology and everything else, would we be in such a worse situation we are in Europe as opposed to other Asian countries? So, yeah. So I think globalization is another debate. Economic factors. Colin Kelly, 2011, argued that the economic environment is described for a collection of dynamic variables that impact upon supply and demand and ultimately the organization. Economics is the branch of social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Organizations and as their economic environment because it can impact upon production costs, costs associated with the management of financial resources, such as the cost of capital, and associated with currency exchange rates and spending power of consumers called demand. So here, with economic factors, we're talking about supply and demand, and we're talking about price elasticity and price elasticity of price and inelasticity of price. So, is a price elastic? So a small movement in price will result in a bigger movement in the demand. Inelastic, a small movement, a small movement in X percentage of movement in price will result in a lower percentage movement in the demand. So again, economic factors is important, and even if you're going to another country, you're trading in another country. How is that country's trading in terms of its currency. If you want to invest heavily in the US for the long term, then what's going to happen to the US currency? Because they've come off the gold standard in 1971, they've been quantitative easing like other countries like the UK, and is it justifiably secure in the long time, or in the future will their currencies be replaced? At the moment, the US dollar obviously is the number one go-to currency, but will it remain the number one go-to currency? I don't believe so. Bobby 2014 argued that the economic factors such as wage levels, inflation, and interest rates affect an organization's income and costs. Like reported increase in sales in 2012, since as people were, short of money during the recession, more of them were choosing to shop at Swedish companies' large out-of-town stores because of their low prices. Managers planning capital investments follow economic forecasts. If these suggest slower growth, they may postpone the project. Many people in India are becoming more prosperous. Encouraging Tata.com, the Indian conglomerate, to invest in launching, a low-cost car, the Nano. But so this is very, very important. But when you're thinking about Pastel and you're looking about this, then you need to obviously bear in mind that Pastel is a tool that is used to form part of a situation analysis with other tools, and you can't use it just by itself. But also there are some areas, like we talk about the economic side of Pestel, that needs specialist or professional analysis and research. So it's probably something, unless you're a specialist in, you may not be able to do yourself. In terms of what's affecting gold prices, you might say, well, gold prices are affected by the US dollar. The less people spending on the US dollar, the more people spending on gold. So the weaker the dollar is, the more investment opportunities for gold. But stronger the US dollar, then the weaker gold prices will be, and so on and so forth. So you have to know what you're talking about, and the different factors and the sub factors that affect each other, and the influences that they have on currencies. So yeah, it's not something that you're just going to know unless you're a specialist in. Social cultural forces. Social cultural forces are closely linked with culture and have significant implications for digital marketing. Broadly speaking, the key factors which make up these forces are, social communities based on demographic profiles, social exclusion, and cultural factors. Demographic, an analysis of demographic you know, trends can reveal important issues, such as is there a significant group in each national population of at least a quarter of the adult population that does not envisage ever using the internet. I'm not sure. Maybe the older group, I'm not sure. Um, Social exclusion, part of society is excluded from the facilities available to the remainder. Colin Kelly, 2011, mentioned that the social cultural factors in the macro environment typically include social values, attitudes and beliefs, demographic trends, lifestyle preferences, and skills available. When organizations operate internationally, they need to understand how people in their countries may differ. The international organization must operate in different countries where the inhabitants may differ from those within their home market. Um, you know, the Japanese have a different work culture and ethics to, the British worker. The Japanese worker believes that the company and progress and the success of the company is important. And if, for instance, an employee in Japan goes on strike, then they still go into work, but they have a band on their arm saying, "I'm on strike." But they're still going into work because they don't want to let that company down in terms of its production. They have other things like sleep rooms, because they believe that power naps are important. So there'll be a room with chairs where you can actually sleep for a power nap for 20 minutes. Then it'll wake you up. So the way that the social cultural factors and how people act and behave in different countries is also very important. So there's a video here, social cultural factors. So you can watch this video, which lasts for 7 minutes. Technological factors. Marketers, need to understand digital and internet technology and terminology, as making mistakes can have significant consequences. In this section, we explore, digital technology, the internet, web technology, digital security, technology convergence, and emerging technology. So the internet, the internet is the physical network that links computers across the globe. It consists of the infrastructure of network servers and communication links between them that are used to hold and transport the vast amount of information. The World Wide Web. Well, the World Wide Web is a medium for publishing information and providing services on the internet. It is accessed through web browsers, which display site content on different web pages. The content making up websites is stored on web servers. The web server. The web server is used to store the web pages accessed by the web browsers. They may also contain databases of customers or product information, which can be, queried and retrieved using a browser. So technological factors. So Bobby 2014 says, companies pay close attention to the physical infrastructure, such as the adequacy of power supplies and transport system. Even more, they monitor advances in information technology, which are dramatically changing the business environment, of many companies. Computers traditionally handle data, while other systems handle voice, telephones, and pictures. Decision the packaging of data, images and sounds into a single format has profound implications for many industries. So we'll have a look at this table below. So, Bernoff and Lee 2008 cited Bobby 2014, and they argued how social networking, Facebook, and user-generated content sites, YouTube, change technology context to which companies respond. So if we look at DVDs, we can see the application, store sounds and visual images. Business affected, sales of stereophonic and systems decline sharply. iPod MP3, digital downloads of music and films. Threat to retailers like HMV, almost went out of business in 2013. Broadband services delivering online content, enables readers and advertisers to use online media rather than print or television. So here we've got the circulation and advertising and revenue of newspapers decline, some more online. Voice over Internet protocol enables telephone calls over the Internet at very low cost. So here we've seen the growth of new providers like Skype. Digital photography, enables people to store pictures electronically, and other prints online. Photographic retailers such as Jessop's got out of business. But even if you look at Kodak digital film, used to have their film take pictures and then film developed. They've gone out of business, and yet they were the first company who had the first and pioneered the first digital cameras. But they didn't really take, grasp of that opportunity. They didn't lead the way forward. So again, a mistake there. So Bobby 2014 says, the natural resources available in an economy, including minerals, agriculture, land, and prevailing climate, affect the kind of business that managers create. Many senior managers know that climate change has major implications for the organizations and are working on best how to respond. Some businesses will face serious risks from droughts, floods, storms, and even heat waves. Less rainfall in some places, more in others. For some, this represents a threat. Insurance companies, house builders, and water companies, are only the most visible examples. For other sustainability brings opportunities. Alternative energy suppliers, emission control business, and waste management companies are all experiencing rising demand for their products and services. So there's a video here for technological factors. It's again 7 minutes long. So have a look at this video for the technological factors. So environmental factors. In a digital world, changes in the social culture and particularly pop culture, what's hot and what's not, tend to be very rapid. Introduction of new technologies and changes in the popularity tend to occur frequently. Government and legal changes tend to happen over a longer timescales. Therefore, digital marketers need to be alert, to the forces that are important in the context of their own trading environment, so they can aim to ensure the competitiveness of their business. Legal factors, we're looking at Bobby 2014, and he argued that competent governments assert their authority over the territory, creating a stable legal framework, embodying the rule of law, commercial contracts and property rights, including intellectual property covering patents and inventions. Without these tools, organizations find it difficult and expensive to operate, which led the UK Parliament to pass the Joint Companies Act in 1862. So when we talk about the legislation in the UK, they obviously go through a legal process in terms of putting a bill forward in houses of in Parliament, which would include a first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, third reading, and then it will pass on to the next house with the same process: first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, third reading. It would then go back to the first house for any amendments, and then back onto the Queen once passed for her stamp of approval or the royal assent. So digital marketers, should be, compliant with the law and adhere to ethical standards. But the rate of technological innovation is rapid, and constantly the law is often unclear because technology is moving basically faster than the law. And I've just explained to you the process in terms of the first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, third reading. Onto the second house, back to the first house, back to the Queen. Well, technology's already moved on. So again, something needs to happen there. So ethical standard practices and behaviours which are, morally acceptable to society. So we need to also think, as well as legal side, but the ethical standards as well. So, we have a table here, and here are some of the significant laws which controls digital marketing. So we got to the data protection and privacy law. We've got the disability and discrimination law, the brand and trademark protection legislation, intellectual property rights, very important. Contract law, in terms of an offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, legality, and intent to create legal relations, and the online advertising law. And then within each of these sections, for instance, it goes into more detail. So intellectual property rights in terms of protection of digital assets such as text, content, images, audio, and sounds through digital rights management. DRM. Contract law. The viability of electronics relevant to cancellations, returns, errors in pricing, distance selling law. How long, if you buy something over the internet, how long do you have to return that? Because if you return it within a certain period of time, then you have the right to return it. But if it's a made to measure or special order, then you don't have the right to return it. So again, what are the laws relevant to your website that you're selling? Again, online advertising law, similar issues to trademark, traditional media such as representation of offer, causing offence in terms of viral marketing. If we think about the disability and discrimination law, here we're talking about the accessibility of content such as images that are visually, impaired, within different digital environments like the website, email, mobile marketing, IPTV. Accessibility affecting other forms of disability, including hearing difficulties and motor impairment. When we think about the data protection and privacy law, here we're talking about things like collection, storage, usage, and deletion of personal information directly from the data capture on forms and indirectly through tracking behavior through website analytics. Email marketing and SMS mobile marketing. The use of viral marketing to encourage transmission of marketing messages through consumers. The use of cookies and other techniques for personalizing content and tracking on site, and the use of cookies for tracking between sites, for example advertising networks. The use of digital assets installed on a user's PC for marketing purposes, e.g. like toolbars or other downloadable utilities, sometimes referred to as malware. So these things here. So there's some more videos here, so have a look at these videos listed here. And there's an activity here. Okay, so today what have we covered? We have covered the macro environment effects, the legal and moral constraints, and the macro environmental factors. So thank you today from Mr. Tan.